Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Howard Lerner. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Law and Policy Center. Let me welcome you to this ELPC Thinks, where we bring together experts, community members, environmentalists to talk about new strategies for progress and, frankly, how we're getting things done that matter a lot. A quick heads up, we're recording this webinar. We're streaming live on Facebook, and feel free to share it with people who weren't able to join us today. And today, I'm honored to have with me clients, colleagues, friends, Amalia Neto Gomez and Sam Corona of the Alliance of the Southeast, and Brian Gladstein, Executive Director of Friends of the Parks. Amalia is the Executive Director of the Alliance of the Southeast. Sam is the Environmental Justice Organizer. And what we're doing today is sort of a behind the scenes look at what's been a big win for the community, how community organizing, strategic litigation, sustained public advocacy, putting them all together, combining them in a model campaign to achieve two victories: stopping the Army Corps of Engineers from building a new 25-foot high toxic waste dump site along the shoreline of Lake Michigan on the southeast side, which is already overburdened by pollution. And not just stopping something bad, but the big success here, the announcement that once the Army Corps of Engineers cleans up the new site, the site caps it, restores it, seals off the toxic contamination, this will become a new lakefront park, future park number 608, for people in the community and all Chicagoans to use and enjoy. So this is really pretty exciting. And what we're going to have is if you will, a full circle moment. We're going to dive into the history, who did what, how we got there, what happened, and eventually how we won and what comes next. All right. So tell you what, Amalia, how about if you start? Talk about the community opposition that began 6 to 7 years ago with you and Sam and others organizing residents to say enough is enough. Let's not have another toxic waste dump on the southeast side, and let's have the long promised park.
Thanks, Howard. My name's Amalia Nieto Gomez. I'm the Executive Director for the Alliance of the Southeast, and help staff the Coalition for Southward CBA. And we got involved because this originally started out as we already had the CDF that was long overdue. And originally the Army Corps had proposed 6 or 7 sites, and they were all in the 10th Ward, and they basically said, pick your poison, literally. And at that time, we were talking with our coalition members and with local residents, and folks were saying, you know what, enough is enough. We don't want this. And so we ended up turning in 8,600 signatures against having a second CDF site in the 10th Ward. And the Army Corps proposed an expansion. And again, community residents came together and said, no, 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 you don't understand. We have a lot of toxins already in the area. We don't want any more dumping, and we're tired of being the dumping ground for the city. And this is to give context. We were doing this at the same time General Iron was being proposed, and so we were fighting 2 toxic developments at the same time.
And
So
Amalia,
that's
for people who might not know, CDF, that was
CDF.
called the Confined Disposal Facility. That was the toxic waste dump that was sited back in the mid 1980s. And talk about the promise to the community that was made when the CDF, that toxic waste dump, was filled.
Well, it was supposed to be only for 10 years, and this is toxic dredgings from the Calumet River. They were originally put into the middle of the lake, but they were so toxic that the EPA at that time said, no, we're going to have a confined disposal facility on the lakefront. That was in mid 80s. And that was only supposed to be for 10 years, and they were supposed to, after 10 years, turn it over into a park. That was in the mid 80s. In 2018, so what is that, 30 years later, the Army Corps comes and says, okay, we want to build a second site. And we said, no. And then they said, okay, fine. How about an expansion? And we said, no. And then the Army Corps continued to move forward without listening to the community. And so, even though we were organizing around it, it wasn't enough. And so, that's when we came together and said, okay, I think we need to fight this legally also. And so, that's how we linked up with the Environmental Law and Policy Center, or ELPC, and we were co plaintiffs with Friends of the Parks. And so that's how that happened, because the community said enough is enough. We don't want any more toxins. We are organizing around it, but the Army Corps is still moving forward. And so this was the only other way to get the Army Corps to stop and take notice and listen to the community.
Let me segue, Brian, over to you and add one fact in this. One thing about Chicago is there are a lot of people who have long memories. So when Amalia was talking back when the CDF was started in the mid 1980s, there was a promise made. It was part of the legislative package. It was, if there's going to be a CDF on the southeast side, when it's filled, that site will be cleaned up and made into a new public park. And I think, Amalia, it's sort of fair to say the Army Corps sort of forgot about that, right? Brian,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about Friends of the Parks in the last 4 miles and how this fits into that.
Yeah, thank you. Um, so I'm Brian Gladstein. I'm the executive director of Friends of the Parks. I will say that I started in this role in March. And so it is nice to be involved in such an amazing victory, but know that there were many, many people who were involved in this work, Sam and Amalia and people from Friends of the Parks, that are not here and represented. So I just wanted to be clear and say that. Um, so Friends of the Parks, we are a 50-year-old organization that is working to improve the whole park system in all 77 communities throughout Chicago. It's the lakefront and beyond, and really pushing for preservation of our parks, as and promoting for parks and park equity throughout the system. We have been successful in a lot of different efforts, from helping to create Garfield Park Conservatory and saving South Shore Cultural Center. But what I have heard over and over is that this may be one of the most gratifying and exciting and important wins of them all over the 50 years. Um, so the last 4 miles that Howard was referring to is when, one of the biggest assets that we have. There are many assets of Chicago, but one of them is also our beautiful lakefront that is clear, free, and open, and was established by our founders to be so. And when the plans were created to create our beaches and our lakefront, they did not finish the whole system that was planned. There were 2 miles on the stretch on the north from Hollywood to Evanston. And then there's a stretch of 2 miles from South Shore Cultural Center to the Indiana border that were never completed and never finished. And so we have, as an organization, have advocated that that should happen to create connectivity to the rest of the city. And especially on the southeast side, where we have seen it be, as mentioned before, a kind of toxic dumping ground for the rest of the city. And talking to a lot to Sam and Amalia and others, that there's a real feeling that that is a neighborhood that is often forgotten when we think about the Chicago blueprint. And so having that connectivity we think is vital and important. And so the fact that this landfill was promised to turn into a park, 1980s to 1990s, is way overdue. And when they finally filled it up, for them to then have the audacity to come to the community and say, oh, no, we're going to renege on that promise, like has happened to so many folks in this community and throughout Chicago's neighborhoods. And they were going to build vertically, and they already had 1 million cubic yards of toxic waste, and they were going to double that. And so the community action and the legal work over the last 7 years has been vitally important. And we see this as a connectivity of turning this into a lakefront that will help build a piece of that 2 mile stretch. And we are continuing to look to expand that from the Indiana border to the cultural center so that people have connectivity to go to the southeast side as well as southeast side to the rest of the city down to the Indiana border.
So here's how ELPC got involved. Amalia and the previous executive director of Friends of the Parks called up and basically said, help. The Army Corps of Engineers, hey, Howard, remember the old CDF? Remember the promise that it would be closed, it would be capped and turned into a park? Not so. The Army Corps of Engineers wants to build a 25-foot high new toxic waste dump on top. And it will be on the shores of Lake Michigan in the southeast side. And as Amalia put it, the Army Corps says, we looked at a lot of different possibilities, but all the final candidates were all in the 10th Ward, all on the southeast side. And here's why we took this case. First of all, it's a vitally important precedent for Chicago, but also throughout the Midwest. Too often, environmental bad things, toxic waste dumps, are put on the shoreline of Lake Michigan or Lake Superior or Lake Huron. And that's just a bad idea when it comes to our Great Lakes, where we live, work, and play. And it's being put again on the southeast side, an environmental justice community that has really been overburdened by toxics. So we had a case where we were dealing with four things at once: an environmental justice issue, a protecting Lake Michigan issue, an issue involving dealing with climate change realities, that we're going to have more intense storms, high winds whipping up heavy waves. So to put a new 25-foot high toxic waste dump on the shores of Lake Michigan where it's going to get battered by heavy waves is just a bad idea. It defies common sense. And then finally, this had promised to be a park. And it should be a park, both for the reasons Amalia and Brian said. So as we've been saying time and time again, and I know everybody's heard this from me a million times, Chicago's lakefront is for people and parks, not for toxic waste dumps. And when ELPC takes on a case, we do it and we play to win. And here we had two terrific clients and two terrific partners in the Alliance of the Southeast and Friends of the Parks. And we've worked closely together, not just in the court, but in the court of public opinion. So the communications team, Judith Nemes, did a terrific job working with Friends of the Parks and the Alliance of the Southeast and our staff here at ELPC. We got editorial board support from the Tribune and the Sun-Times. We had a joint op-ed by the executive directors, Amalia, Brian's predecessor, Juanita Irizarry, and me, that laid out the case. We worked the media. We met with the leading public officials. Kudos to Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth, to Governor Pritzker and his Illinois EPA. We met with people at the city of Chicago. We met with the aldermen. Everybody who knows Chicago, all politics is local. We went over to see Alderman Chico after a meeting in which he asked all the right questions, and community residents answered a lot of it. Friends of the Parks weighed in. We weighed in. Alderman Chico said, I'll write to the mayor and tell the mayor that I'm going to oppose this. So kudos to Alderman Chico on opposing the toxic waste dump expansion. You put it all together, that's the model for a campaign that succeeds. A coalition of community groups, policy groups, legal groups working together, not just filing lawsuits that are done in combination with media, political outreach, and coalition building. And we're proud that 24 other groups, community groups, environmental groups, and conservation groups in Chicago, all went on to a letter that went to the governor. It went to the mayor. It went to the two senators saying, there's got to be a better alternative here. Say no to the Army Corps of Engineers. So important key punchline. The Illinois EPA denied the required state water quality permits for this new toxic waste dump to be built. And that's really terrific. I think it's the first time in years that the Illinois EPA has denied the permits based on Illinois law, said the Army Corps of Engineers did not comply with Illinois law when it came to seeking approval of this new toxic waste dump site. And because the Illinois EPA and the governor's office held firm on that, the Army Corps of Engineers was forced to say in court it could not build without those state permits. And thank you to Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who on behalf of the Illinois EPA filed an amicus curiae brief with the federal district court that said, here's the position of the Attorney General on behalf of the people of the state of Illinois. Here's the position on behalf of the Illinois EPA. The permits have been denied. They don't comply with Illinois law. And the Southeast side, an environmental justice community, should not be burdened with more toxic waste and toxic threats. You put that all together, and the judge said to the Army Corps of Engineers, can you proceed without the state permits? And after being pushed and dodging and weaving a little bit, the attorney said, no, we can't. And the Army Corps of Engineers withdrew the environmental impact statement for the proposed new 25-foot high toxic waste dump on top of the existing CDF. But what's special here and what led to this victory is we did an excellent job at ELPC lawyering. We did our job well in the federal court. ASE and Friends of the Parks did a really good job organizing. And we all worked together to work the media, engage with public officials. You put it all together, that's how you win. And it's a big win for everybody. Let's talk a little bit about some of the pressure points. And, Amalia, maybe you want to talk a little bit about just the meeting that you and Sam and all of us had with Alderman Chico. Sort of how did that go? How did that work?
Well, I would actually have to pass that to Sam because I wasn't at that meeting. It was a very key meeting. So I don't know, Sam, if.
Take it away, Sam Corona.
Sure thing. Thank you very much. As Howard mentioned, my name is Samuel Corona. I am the community organizer for environmental justice for Alliance of the Southeast. And yes, it was a very pivotal moment to have our local alderman actually sign on because the one thing that if you know the way Chicago works is nothing gets done unless you get the support of your local alderman, right? Nobody wants to step on another alderman's in his problems in his community without his supports, right? And I think what it really took was, first off, the community organizing prior to his election. So prior to his even being elected as our local alderman, we went door knocking from the moment Army Corps of Engineers told us that we had 7 different spaces where they were going to give us the luxury of figuring out where our next future landfill was going to be so that it can continue to contaminate our community. And one thing I thought was just funny is the Army Corps of Engineers just makes it seem like having a confined disposal facility is a badge of honor. To us, it's just proof we're being burdened and buried alive in pollution. No other community has a landfill on the lakefront, right? So with that understanding, the community decided that we cannot let this happen. We've been ran over by industry for so long that this is our stand. This is our only 10th Ward beach that we have for our youth and our community to enjoy. So there's too much to sacrifice if we allow this landfill to have a tower of toxic dredgings simply so that the Army Corps of Engineers saves money and provides us with a toxic tower that we can overlook the beautiful lakefront as we continue to poison our drinking water. And because of that pressure, the alderman understood that these are our assets that are at risk. It's not just, you know, anything political. This is about the community is at risk. And he understood that, building this partnership with all these organizations showed that united we can do anything because, we've been so divided so many times that, our arguments fall apart as soon as the pressure comes. So I think having him engaged and willing to become a partner and, signing on and asking the mayor also to sign on, just showing that, it's not going to be business as usual. That enough pressure from our community started to say that, you know, um, we cannot be the sacrifice zone of every time the city of Chicago wants development. And environmental racism is real and it exists in the 10th Ward and other communities of color.
I got to tell you, Sam, one of my most fun, proud moments, and I've said this to you before. So several months ago, I got to call up Sam and say, Sam, the Army Corps just withdrew its environmental impact statement. We won. And Sam said to me, we won? I said, Sam, we won. They withdrew the environmental impact statement. Sam, we never win. Sam, we won. It was a good moment. It just was a good moment. And we're all pretty proud of it. Speaking of one thing that I know, Brian, you're proud of, and Friends of the Parks is proud of, it's when Juanita Irizarry was the executive director and got involved in this case for Friends of the Parks. And then Jill Kilgore carried it on, and now you've joined uh, 7, 8, 9 months ago. It's that Friends of the Parks is working not just on the north side or downtown, but on the south side. And I know that matters a lot to you. And just talk about that for a couple minutes or a minute.
Yeah, it's an interesting moment for
Yeah.
our park system. Um, we have a new superintendent at the parks. Friends of the Parks was started 50 years ago because of a history of patronage and inefficiencies that are happening in the parks, especially on the west and on the south side of Chicago. And we have seen decades of investment in our parks, but not always on the west and on the south side of Chicago. We have seen major developments downtown in our public parks and our park systems. We've seen developments on the north side, which still need a lot of work as well. But often communities like on the southeast side are forgotten about. And often there is a connection to issues of race and issues of class that happen in those communities. And the city has often put toxic waste dumps and other things that have not been for the community, but have made decisions for their community, and they brunt the pain, the suffering, the increased cancer rates that are well documented on the southeast side of Chicago, and that goes back decades. There's a reason that Hazel Johnson is considered the mother of environmental justice, and she is from Altgeld Gardens on the southeast side of Chicago. Businesses, corporations, private entities for too long have been setting up shop, polluting the air, the water, and the land on the southeast side, and then leaving and not remediating the properties. And so for us to win this fight, and to know that this will be remediated, cleaned up, and turned into a park is a huge, as you said, victory. And it's a victory not just for the southeast side, it's a victory for everyone. And for the park district to make the announcement 2 weeks ago that they are going to put $500,000 into a framework plan So the first phase of creating any park is what the park district calls a framework plan. We are going to push for this to be a community-driven framework plan, not that a typical historical framework plan that is done for the community, but we want this to be led by the community to figure out what the next steps are and what this park is going to look like. And then how do we connect it to other areas that I mentioned before, especially with the South Works proposal coming in and the need for improvements in other parks like Calumet Park that this butts up against, Steelworkers Park, and Park 566. So there's a lot for us to still do, but this is a great, great opportunity for us to transform a community that everyone can be proud of.
So let me talk for a little bit about what comes next, and let's be sure to get to some Q&A here because I see we have some questions lined up. This was a model coalition of community groups, the Alliance of the Southeast, which combines, I think, 11 groups within that umbrella, Friends of the Parks, a policy group that works in communities, and the Environmental Law and Policy Center, public interest attorneys who work on behalf of environmental groups and community groups. And we bring to the table not just litigation capacity, which we use, but working the media, being able to engage with the political leaders. If you want to win in the court of law, it helps a lot to win in the court of public opinion. So this was really a model pulling this all together. And this case took everything to win: legal firepower, community organizing, smart explanations of policies of why the Army Corps of Engineers was required to clean up the site, a communications push, editorial support. You put it all together, there's not a magic silver bullet. You put that together, though, it's a formula for success. So here's what comes next. And Brian talked about it just a minute ago. 2 weeks ago, Amalia and Sam and Brian and I stood on the site of what is right across from the toxic waste landfill, the CDF. And the Chicago Park District unveiled the sign, Future Park number 608. And we did a press conference with Superintendent Carlos Ramirez Rosa, his staff, Angela Tovar, who's the city's sustainability coordinator, head of the Department of Environment, State Senator Robert Peters, Alderman Chico was there as well, community standing residents, lots of people. And it's not just we stopped something bad, but we had a vision for the future. And as Brian mentioned, we're now on the path to not have what Amalia and Sam were talking about, a new toxic waste dump, the toxic waste 25-foot high tower immediately north of Calumet Park on the southeast side of Chicago, but a new park, Future Park 608, for which the planning is going to begin now, that will connect to Calumet Park. And I just have to say, I stuck around for a while after the press conference. I just looked up at the site, and in my mind, I was just envisioning, families with kids who are playing there and swimming. It really was a pretty magical moment, I know, for all of us. In different ways, but in similar ways, we really accomplished something here. And a lot of people in Chicago and a lot of people, particularly in the 10th Ward, the Southeast Side, and the community, will really benefit from this going forward when that new park gets open and the toxic threat is removed. And we don't have a 25-foot high toxic waste dump for the next 30 years. There are a lot of questions that people have been posting. I've been trying to keep up with them. One of them is, how in the heck did you get the Illinois EPA to deny the permits? Given all the things that someone has heard about the Illinois EPA, question from Laura Brunke, we made the case to the Illinois EPA's senior leadership, to the director of the department and his general counsel, that the Army Corps of Engineers should not receive the permits because putting a toxic waste dump on the shoreline of Lake Michigan in a community that's already overburdened by pollution doesn't comply with Illinois law. And to the credit of the Illinois EPA, and I know this went up through the governor's office, and the EPA director had to get the approval from some of the senior people in the governor's office, denied the first permit. It was a pretty interesting moment in the federal court about 2 years ago when the Justice Department attorney on behalf of the Corps said they expected to get their permit within about a week. And the judge asked me if that was going to happen. I said, Your Honor, I can't tell you it won't happen, but I'm not so sure about that. And the judge asked, well, does the Illinois EPA ever deny permits? And I said, not very often, but might happen here. And the judge was sort of perplexed, and he suggested that we both call up the Illinois EPA together and ask what the Illinois EPA was going to do. And I believe it was April 25th, a couple of years ago, the Corps of Engineers pushed the Illinois EPA, and the Illinois EPA director wrote a letter that said, the permit is not granted. That was the first of the permits. And of course, we filed that right away with the federal court. The second permit, it's a state permit that's called the certification under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act. The Corps went in to meet with the Illinois EPA, I believe it was December of 2023. And the Corps was essentially told by the Illinois EPA, we don't think you meet the conditions under Illinois law. And early in 2024, the Illinois EPA denied that second permit. And then the Corps didn't come back for the third permit because I think they understood that the Illinois EPA wasn't going to grant it. So kudos to all of us for making the legal case to the Illinois EPA that it should not grant the permits. But kudos to everybody for weighing in with the Illinois EPA, for dealing with the media, the public officials, and others that created the climate by which the Illinois EPA could resist the pressure from the Army Corps of Engineers and could call it as he saw it, which was the Army Corps didn't meet the criteria here, permit denied. And without that approval, here, the Army Corps of Engineers could not go forward. And kudos to the Illinois Attorney General who weighed in with the court and explained that even if the permit, apart from the permit denial, this was not another project that should go forward again on the southeast side of Chicago, adding more toxics to a community that's already been overburdened. So hopefully that gives you a good explanation of what the Illinois EPA has done. And the Army Corps has come back. They keep asking the Illinois EPA to let them go forward. And so far, the Illinois EPA, they've played it by the book. They've written some very detailed memos, and they've said to the Army Corps, we're not approving for you to go forward. That's good news.
And if I could add something to that, Howard.
Please.
I think that this is a really good case of like how organizing and legal come together, because this doesn't happen in a vacuum. So everything of that happened. A lot of the groundwork was laid because, like I said, General Iron and the CDF, those happened the same year. Those got, the community conversations about that were both in 2018. And we had two events within a week of each other in June 2018, one on the CDF and then one on General Iron. I think, I really want to give kudos and a shout out to Southeast Side community residents because, we went from the Illinois EPA rubber stamping a lot of permits, including the General Iron one, to fighting against Finkel Steel, which the Illinois EPA held community hearing, and then Finkel Steel withdrew their application for additional furnaces. And then to this point where the Illinois EPA is denying permits. I think this is a huge, huge movement that we've seen in the Illinois EPA in a good way, to be able to recognize environmental justice communities and overburdened communities. So I just want to say, like, this is a lot of partnerships at work,
Yep.
and I don't think that individually we would have been able to win if we didn't all come together, to do that. So I wanted to big kudos to the Illinois EPA for that. The Illinois Attorney General, coming out, is nice to know that he's from the Southeast side, so can understand a little bit, where, and can relate to the community because he's from the community. But also the law that he cited was a law that was fought for by Southeast Side residents a while ago. So this has been a long, long fight if you look at the history, but it's been successful because we've been able to bring everyone together. So,
You know, around the ELPC office, there are some phrases that are sometimes called Howardisms. One of them you've heard: if you want to win in the court of law, it sure helps to win in the court of public opinion. And that's the organizing and the media and the communications put together with the litigation. We had the right partners here. That's how we won, as Amalia put it nicely. The other is success has many mothers and fathers of invention. And this one had a lot of parents here. People did things together, did them well. We're all in it together, and it paid off in terms of success. There's a question was asked by Deborah online. What took the Park District so long to get on board? And I think I'll look to the future rather than the past. For whatever reason, the Chicago Park District and the Chicago Mayor's Office weren't fast in terms of joining in our position to say no to the expansion here, the new toxic waste dump. But when Chicago Park District new superintendent Carlos Ramirez Rosa took office a few months ago, I think it's fair to say he got this immediately. He jumped into action. He did whatever magic he needed to do over with the mayor's office. He worked with his staff, and the Park District stepped up in a very significant way. So looking forward, I think we have a very good partnership with Superintendent Ramirez Rosa. He wants to get this done, both in terms of cleaning up the existing site and requiring the Corps to do that, and then moving forward, as Brian was describing, with the planning process for future park number 608. Brian, I want to check and see if you have a take on this, because Friends of the Parks deals with the Park District, every day. That's core to what you do. Take what I said and, just add on your thinking.
Yeah, I think there are two things that I'm thinking about. One would be that, so as Friends of the Parks, we meet with the Park District, which has included Carlos and his team on a monthly basis. And that, as well as his predecessor. But Carlos has been at every one of our meetings. And we have brought the CDF from Jump Street when he took this new position, and made it really clear to him that this needs to be a priority for the city and needs to be a priority for the Park District, and really talking to him about what it would mean for the Park District to create a new lakefront park on the southeast side. Like this can become a legacy moment for the Park District, for the city, for Carlos, for the mayor. And so, right, we always talk about self-interest in organizing. And so I think being able to be really clear and talking to the Park District about what's their win in this, why they should put their efforts into this. We always think that people should do everything that's right by the people, but we know that's not always how the reality works, the world that we wish it to be and the world that it is. And I think having conversations with all the elected officials in very different ways and talking to the EPA and talking to the state and the governor's office and the feds all took very careful conversations. And I think the same thing has happened here with the park district. The other thing I will also want to add is I've been on a few national calls and people are starting to hear about this and are reaching out because they're in unique efforts. Some of them are brownfields, some of them are landfills, some of them are they want to build a golf course on public land that I just heard near Buffalo. And this can be a real model of how you turn something like a landfill into a beautiful, amazing public asset like a park. And so I think we have an opportunity here to really help to work with other folks across the country to make sure that we can support other efforts that are right by all the people that often are not seeing, experiencing this type of a victory.
And I'm with you. I'm viewing this not as a one and done, but a real breakthrough for Chicago and a model that can be used and replicated in other places. Sam, is something you want to add, and then folks will move to wrap this up.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the pivotal things that we kind of always just overlook is the fact that the Southeast side has a long history and a legacy in environmental justice and activism and activating our community. It was the generation previous, which Hazel M. Johnson and a lot of our local community members led to the moratorium on the landfills in Cook County. And that right there, like we said, full circle, right, is actually what helped seal in the deal that said the CDF can no longer be in existence in our community. And they needed to close the only landfill that our community has been gifted on the lakefront, right? And we will actually have a beautiful park in its place once the shadow of the toxins are gone, right? But the one thing is it's layers of effort. It's not just community, but it does, I think, start there because one thing we understand in politics in Chicago, the community pressure is the vote system that pushes all of our agencies and all of our elected officials. If we don't have the support of the local alderman, the mayor may not sign on, and then the park district does not want us. So I think we make sure that we bring all of these agencies to understand that it's in their benefit to represent us and give us something better than what was there before. Thank you.
Well, it's time to wrap up, and you said it, though, very, very well, Sam. We're all in this together. And Amalia, Sam, Brian, thank you for spending your time with us today. Thank you to everybody joining us today. The Alliance of the Southeast, Friends of the Parks, Brian, Amalia, Sam, you've been terrific partners. You've been terrific clients, and I both greatly enjoy and respect working with you. So the job ain't over yet. We appreciate all that everybody's been doing. And now we need to make sure that the Army Corps of Engineers cleans up, restores, remediates the site, caps it, seeds it, and then the park district really works to make this a great park for community residents and everyone in Chicago to use and enjoy. And you got a lot of people here who've been part of the success, and let's go celebrate together on this. All right. So we'll be emailing this recording out to everybody who is registered. We'll be sharing it on social media. Please keep an eye out for future ELPC webinars and ELPC Thinks. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for Amalia for everything you've done. You've been wonderful clients, partners, and friends. Let's get this done. All right. Take care, all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.